Hi, my name is Michael Seiler, and I want to share with you the results of our study published in the Journal of Real Estate Research. The title of our paper is Lender Characteristics and the Neurological Reasons for Strategic Mortgage Default. So you might be asking, real estate and neurological studies, what does that type of science have to do with real estate? So let me tell you a little bit of history about neurology. In 1848, there was a railroad foreman named Phineas Gage. Phineas was tasked with building a railroad up in Vermont, and the way that you do that, the way that you clear the rocks, is to take gunpowder, put it into the hole, then take sand, and then take something called a tamping rod. A tamping rod is 3 foot long, 3 foot 8 inches. You pack it in, and then you put a fuse in there, you light the fuse, and you get out of there and let it blow the rocks away and then continue on, repeat the process. Well, one day Phineas must have gotten distracted because what he did was he put the gunpowder in, he forgot to put the sand in. So he takes this long metal rod and he jams it in like he's supposed to pack the sand in and make the gunpowder really tight and explosive. But as he was hitting, the rod hit the rock and caused a spark, which ignited the gunpowder, and it shot this hard rod right through his face. It took out his cheekbone and went through his frontal cortex all the way out the top of his head, shot the rod some 30 yards away. Now, Phineas did not die immediately as you might have guessed he would. He was actually conscious at the site, and people took him, quite slowly of course back in those days, but they took him to a local doctor. And shockingly, he survived for another 12 years after the accident. But he was never quite the same. People said that his behavior was of a person who they did not even recognize, completely different. And so at the time, they had no understanding of why. They just thought he had an accident and he's just a different person. Maybe he's just bitter from the accident. Well, sadly, over the years, other people have had different accidents that affected different parts of their brain, and it caused a different problem, but a neurological problem nonetheless. So now where we are is that we know different parts of the brain control different parts of your behavior. We can now take an fMRI machine, a functional magnetic resonance imaging machine, and we can map or watch the blood flow. We measure it through the magnetic properties in your blood, but we can actually see it flow from one part of your brain to another. So we decided to see, as people were contemplating a strategic mortgage default decision, where is the blood flowing in their brain? If we can see what part of the brain is receiving blood, then we know what part of their brain they're using to make these decisions. So it's a fascinating application of neurology to real estate, which is something that we've been looking forward to doing. It took us many years to get this study. It's very, very expensive. And what we did is we took 20 people from a town in the southwest part of the United States, went into an established lab, and had these people lay inside of this fMRI machine, walk them through a number of different scenarios to find out what variables were most indicative of them being willing to strategically default. And as a follow-up to another study that I published in Journal of Real Estate Finance and Economics, we used a similar set of questions. So for example, we asked, is it easier to default on a local bank with whom you've had a long-term relationship as opposed to a bank who maybe you found on the internet, and to you they're nameless and faceless, you've never really met them? Is that easier for you to default? And then the other thing is we said, well, what about defaults being commonplace versus rare? If everyone around you is defaulting, then you defaulting doesn't seem that out of the ordinary. You're not really taking a great risk. And then thirdly, we said, what about banks who have behaved very egregiously? They've taken government bailout funds, they've made subprime loans. They're just not really a likable bank, as opposed to a financially conservative bank. And we also confirm that these things do matter, but interestingly enough, the question is, where does the blood flow? We found out that as people are receiving this information about these egregious banks, the blood is flowing to a part of their brain that makes them feel quite angry and quite frustrated, quite disgusted, frankly. They want to seek retribution, but they're trying to fight against it. So blood is flowing to actually multiple parts of their brain. They know that they can't go out and do something physical to these banks, but that's what their body is telling them that they want to do. So they're really holding back this disdain, their desire to lash out against these lenders. And then interesting, the other thing we found is that what if we were to allow any type of modification? So in a few of these situations, we said, here's the situation, it's an egregious bank, you've asked for them to modify your loan only by $100 on a $1,500 loan. They said that they would modify. We had other treatments where they wouldn't modify. And what we found is that when a lender is willing to modify your loan, it signals such a degree of cooperation that that feeling of retribution, disgust, and that you want to get back at them, the retaliation, goes away completely. So the indication for lenders is that I know that it's a slippery slope. We know that there's a moral hazard problem with forgiving debt or reducing the interest rate on a loan. But if you can show some level of cooperation, no matter how minor, it takes away a lot of the anger, a lot of the angst, a lot of the reasons why people are going to default on you. And so if it's small enough, it shouldn't cost that much money, but it goes a long way in preventing a future mortgage default. And we know that a lot of people, even after receiving a modification, will redefault. So maybe looking at this cooperation angle is going to be important to helping the industry. Thank you very much.